Hey guys, it is daylight savings time again. Time change for the fall back, which is easier for your sleep schedule but harder for your clock setting because that clock hand has to go backwards 1 hour. So let me give you a quick rundown of how to do that. And we'll start by looking at kind of the easiest and then look at the other end of the spectrum and then talk about some other options in between. So let's start with this. Now, a lot of people have clocks like this, and it might be a grandfather clock, could be a wall clock, but they all look fairly similar. If you have a modern grandfather clock made in the 70s, 80s, 90s, or newer, it probably looks something like this. Now, with these, pretty much all of them, you can move the hand backwards an hour. You can move it backwards. In fact, that is oftentimes the manufacturer's recommendation, is they actually prefer that you go backwards instead of forwards. So when daylight savings comes, all you gotta do is take that minute hand and turn it back an hour. But the other end of the spectrum is something like this. This is an old American clock, and these are generally from the late 1800s and sometimes early 1900s. And with these, you almost can never turn them backwards for two reasons. One, because a lot of them, the minute hand won't even go backwards. It'll get stuck when you're somewhere around 12 o'clock. Or because you might be able to go backwards, but then the strike will just keep doing what it was doing. So if it struck twice last time, it's going to strike 3 next time, and it doesn't really know where the hands are pointing or not, if they're pointing to the 2 or 3 or something else. And so your strike sequence will get off if you try to turn the hands backwards, even if you can. So with these old types of clocks, generally you don't want to turn them backwards. Now, these old clocks have 2 winding arbors. You can see the 2 holes to wind it right there. And so one of these is going to run the time, and one will run the noise, the strike. And it's that strike that's really the issue, is the noise-making functions. If all you have is time, like this one only has 1 winding arbor, and it doesn't make any noise, you can turn these hands forward or backwards or whatever, it doesn't care, because there's nothing inside to be triggered. Whereas with anything that makes noise, you're going to trigger something, and it's that trigger mechanism that can be problematic, get stuck, and get damaged or whatnot. Now, clocks like these humpbacks, some of them you can turn backwards and some of them you can't. And without knowing what's going on the inside, it may be hard to tell. And so what do you do in that case if you're not sure? Well, what you can always do is just stop the pendulum, set a timer, and come back in an hour and start it up again, and it'll be set back an hour. So if you're ever not sure, you can always do that. Just stop the pendulum, stop the clock, and then come back an hour later. Let's talk about battery-powered clocks, quartz clocks. With these, most of the time you can turn them backwards without any issues. However, if they make noise, then there's a little trigger in there that could get damaged if you go backwards. And so you need to look and see what the manufacturer recommends. And if there's a recommendation, they'll have an arrow telling you which way you can go. So this one's chiming, and yet it's got an arrow saying you can go forward or backwards. This one, however, it's got an arrow saying you can only go forward. And so make sure you look closely for that arrow. Sometimes they're hard to see, but look closely and it'll tell you what to do there. Here's a few other options. We've got something like this. This one, with these 2 arbors, it's hard to tell a lot of times. This one is a modern one and can be turned backwards. This one, however, there's lots of German wall clocks like this, and without knowing specifically which clock it is, you might not be able to tell if it can go forward or backwards without seeing the internals. And so something like this, I would recommend just stop the pendulum, and come back an hour later. Here's some cuckoo clocks. Now, we've got 2 different styles of cuckoo clock. That's a modern cuckoo clock, and that is an antique cuckoo clock. These antique cuckoo clocks are they could be from the 1800s, early 1900s, 1920s, 30s, things like that. And then these cuckoo clocks, modern ones, are made 50s-ish and newer, and they all look fairly similar. Like, you can tell that it's not an old antique. Like, all the old antique ones look kind of like this, and all the new ones look kind of something like this. And so if you have one of these, it's kind of a gamble, because here's the deal. You can go backwards with the hand, and it won't hurt anything on the inside. You can go backwards as much as you want. However, what can happen is this nut right here that holds the hand on, that might loosen up. Now, in the shop, we always tighten them sufficiently so that they shouldn't loosen up. But if it does come loose, then you'll have to go watch my other video on how to tighten up nuts, or adjust the hands and the nut and stuff on a cuckoo clock. So you can always go forward. You don't need to wait with these. You can go forward as much as you want. So if you want to go forward 11 hours, that's super easy to do on these. Now with these old antique ones, they generally are not as cooperative. So very rarely on these can you actually go backwards. Oftentimes, like with the old American ones, the hands will get stuck or something will get out of sync. And with these to go forward, you always have to wait for it to finish cuckooing, which sometimes that's on the 15-minute, every quarter hour. So you're waiting 4 times an hour times 11, you're waiting 44 times. It takes a long time. So with these, just stop the pendulum, come back an hour later. That'll be your best bet. There are also a bunch of wall clocks that could look like this. These generally are modern clocks and can be turned either direction. Now here's the thing, we were talking about the number of winding holes earlier, and with 1 winding hole you can go either direction. With 2 you might not be able to tell, and with these with 3, almost always these 3 train movements, you can go backwards or forwards. They're usually more modern in style, such that you can do that without any issues. So I hope that helps, and hope that the daylight savings time change goes well for you. If you have any questions, comment below and we'd be more than happy to help give some guidance there. Thanks. Bye.